Herman Larkin announces that he's leaving. Telecommunications tax is finally being used by the city, among other things. I'm Bunker Bob. This is the Bunker Bob Show. Thanks for being with me. Well, and a good Thursday morning to you. It is great to be back with you again. I was with you on Tuesday, and along with the Iron Lady, we kind of prepared for the upcoming council meeting, which occurred on it occurred on last Monday or Tuesday, the same day that we did our last wrap-up show from the fiasco of losing power and then me needing to go take my daughter to soccer practice. But it's now Thursday, so I'm going to be giving a wrap-up of what happened at City Council. And the problem is if you tried to watch it, you couldn't. For some reason, the very expensive system that the city has purchased so that you can see what's going on at City Hall was not working. Again, second time. So all we have is an audio file of the meeting. And it's incredibly frustrating, especially since the system that we used when I was mayor, that I put together for the city, was free. It cost the city nothing. We did it through YouTube, just like this. The same system, the same setup that I have for my own studios is the same one that we set up for the city. In fact, the system that the city has enables a camera to be used, an iPhone to be used as a camera, if you're without a camera. So I will tell you the technical difficulty of putting together a show that we did through YouTube is a lot more difficult than the system that they have now. But for some reason, it's still not working, and that's a little bit of a frustration to me because frankly, I don't have time like most people. I don't have time to sit at a city council meeting. I have to do it at a different time when I'm either not with, especially because I have family, and as so many of us do. And it's unfortunate that what we're experiencing now is more of the same, and it's a real disappointment, I should say, from my end. That said, we've got the audio file. I was able to review the meeting and can basically give you the report on what happened. And the first thing I think that was notable is that the mayor, Keith Short, and council member Kippett, neither one of them were present for the meeting, and so we had basically the mayor pro tem Jim Bloom running the meeting with Herman Larkin, William Dahl, and Trudy Wosner at the council meeting. I'm wondering if I'm missing someone. So that's what I can remember. I think that's right. You've got 5 total members of the council, and then one, take away 2, you leave. Yeah, that's right. So we had 3 members. Okay. So the problem, it's not a problem. It's just a matter of who's there and who's doing the work of our city government. And it was shocking to me, frankly, when you realize that so much work is done by the city administrator to prepare for the meeting, and what's absolutely clear is that you have members of council who don't even take time to read what they are the information that the city administrator puts together so that those members of council can be prepared for the meeting. The first part, one of the things that I thought was interesting, is that Herman Larkin announced that he will be resigning, stepping down from his position, will not be fulfilling his term of office, which of course is not a surprise to most, because it was a very open fact that Herman Larkin had always stated that he didn't plan on fulfilling his full term, that his whole purpose was to basically help his best friend, the then fire chief of the McLennan-Chisholm Volunteer Fire Department, stay in his cushy job, receiving $50,000 a year as a part-time fire chief, despite the fact that the guy had absolutely no experience as a full-time firefighter in his entire career, fought less than 5 structure fires, and had the position and the authority to send men into a burning building, which is an incredibly, incredibly dangerous thing to do. Plus, obviously, the misappropriation of funds. They wanted to continue covering that up, and so they have been at it, covering that, the tens of thousands of taxpayer dollars in grants that were given to the McLennan-Chisholm Volunteer Fire Department, and where 10% of every grant was given to the fire chief's brother, who played grant writer for a 3-page grant application. We're talking about tens of thousands of dollars that this brother-in-law or brother, received. Pretty sleazy actions over there, and Herman Larkin is now leaving. So I don't know what the plans are to replace him. I'm sure that they will replace him with a good liberal, as someone who is as ensconced in leftism as Mr. Larkin. So I guess I don't have a lot of confidence in who they're going to be putting in his place. Moving on to the rest of the business of the city council, they also focused on TXDOT. TXDOT came in and talked about the timeline for the $135 million project that is going to be focused on FM 205, State Highway 205, excuse me, and basically focused on the fact that that all land will be acquired by November 2020. That's where they have to purchase the property that they're going to be basically taking away from property owners. So he was confident that the first part of fall they'll have most of it nailed down, but they gave a tighter timeline by saying November 2020 is when all land would be acquired. In August of 2021, the plans are to be completed. So the plans for FM 205, they've made some adjustment with the basically the median, the center median, and so that's one of the changes and adjustments that they've included, and that they're redrawing the plans for that. But in 2021, those plans for 205 will then be settled and completed, and then on May of 2025, that's when the project will actually begin, and it will be meted out in 3 phases, and the second phase of those 3 phases, that's where McLennan-Chisholm's section will be in. Now, he didn't talk about specific timing of McLennan-Chisholm's phase 2 section, but you can kind of guess that since the project is really not slated to end until after 2030, I think, or around that time, it'll be a couple of years before the second phase actually begins. And of course, we're talking about the state, and so the timeline could be pushed back a little bit. Weather will always have an effect on those things, and so just be aware that is coming. And what the things that they changed was basically the center median. So instead of having a split highway, they're going to have they're not going to have a center median for most of the area around McLennan-Chisholm, primarily because the people who live whose driveways come out onto 205 would literally, if they had a split highway, they would have to, if they wanted to turn left and it was across on the other side, well, they would have to go right and then find a place to do a U-turn and then come back around. Well, when I was on council, when I was mayor, Jim Herron, we had talked about that problem and had brought that before the TXDOT, and I think also since I'm out of office, they've continued to kind of talk about that issue as well. So TXDOT listened, and those changes are being made. But it's important to understand that highway is going to be eventually a 6-lane highway. And the 6 lanes are going to be, they're basically going to make the road the final width that it will be. So the road will not, when it's time to make it from a 4-lane to a 6-lane, they're not going to have to do new construction. What they will be doing is, in other words, they will not have to widen it. The median and the I guess the side of the roads, those will be wide enough to where they will just basically reconfigure the lanes. However, there will be construction at that time when it does become a 6-lane road highway. They will make it a divided highway. So at some point in the future, those of you who live along 205 understand that right now, when they initially put that highway together and finish that, it will not be divided. But once they make it a 6-lane, they will divide that, and for the safety, frankly, of those who live there. So that's an important point, and I suspect that they'll have to really consider the people who need to ingress and egress out of there. I suspect that Sonoma Verde would have a traffic light by that time, and so that there can be a left turn out of Sonoma Verde onto 205. That's my suspicion, but I don't know. And finally, the federal law has required that when highways are created, that they have a sidewalk, which is I have my father lives in Canyon Lake, Texas, which is around New Braunfels area, and they had put in a highway, and I noticed that they had a sidewalk along this highway that people are driving 65, 70 miles an hour. And I thought it was strange, but until I learned that law is in effect. So it's a very unsettling, frankly. If you're walking, it'd be unsettling, but it'd be good for bikers, I guess. And so, but what I know about those who bike is they will never use the sidewalk. They will always use the road. So for people who think that or have been petitioning or hoping that the city would invest in bike lanes, I think that's I don't know that that's going to solve your problem. I doubt you'll want to use the sidewalk for a bike lane, but I guess we'll have to see. So that's the TXDOT. That's what's coming up there, and these are things that I'm sure you would want to know, and the citizens are interested in. So that's long and short of it. And obviously, there's more information at the city. They've been given some schematics that you can download and look at for yourself if you're interested and want more information about that. The big issue I think during the meeting was the telecommunications city tax that the city of McLennan-Chisholm has not been utilizing, and essentially the state of Texas they established a sales tax on telecommunications. And telecommunications tax is a very controversial thing. It always has been, especially since it covers so many different and varying issues. Specifically, it covers cable and landlines and wireless lines. And Texas has some of the highest taxes on telecommunications by far than other states. And in reading up on this, I mean, obviously this is a problem, but the even bigger problem is that it is for a lot of people is that it's a usage fee. So you're using something that has a benefit, and that the city cities have been authorized to draw an income from, because it's part of that 8.25% of the sales tax. Now, of course, the citizens of McClendon-Chisholm voted to increase or to include and increase the sales tax in the city of McClendon-Chisholm, which would include this. This vote on Tuesday night was basically the city taking advantage of an automatic exemption that every city gets just by law. The city actually has to say, we want to utilize this for city revenue. It's a little backward, but it puts the onus on cities to engage on that. Every city around it, and this is where I get to the fact that you have city council members that are simply not prepared. Council member William Dahl specifically asked a question during the discussion. By the way, the audio of this can be found on the city website. It's on the city's YouTube site. And at 50 minutes 50 seconds into that, the Mr. Dahl asked a question. Well, how many other cities are doing this? And that was shocking for me to hear, because I had actually read through the docket, in what the city administrator does is she posts what the agenda is, and she also posts attachments to it. And it's like the second or third page of this agenda item where it shows all of the cities that have engaged and gotten rid of the exemption, and so that they can use that. Notably, Rockwall, Royce City, Terrell, Garland, Mesquite, Dallas. Pretty much every city has engaged, has adopted this. Which cities haven't? The cities that are not aware of it. It was Adrian Balcom, Councilmember Balcom, who started to investigate, okay, where are our franchise fees coming from? Are we collecting the right amount of money? And she found that no, we weren't. There's things being delivered to your door from Amazon, and a tax is already being charged for you, but the city is not receiving that tax. And she's the one who highlighted, wait a minute, the city of McClendon-Chisholm is owed that tax. So for years we've been, especially as home delivery has really become the way people shop and even eat today, as that has really grown, the opportunity to receive income is quite substantial. And so Adrian highlighted that, and then she saw that this franchise tax, that the city had never exempted from that, or had never pulled away from the exemption from that, which the city has a right to, and that not all citizens, by the way, will necessarily be affected. It's because it is a decision of every citizen to use a telephone. Now, I realize that it's hard not to have a telephone today, but the fact of the matter is the county takes a share of that. The state takes a share of that, and our local community, those of us who, some people have one telephone, some people have many telephones. So it's not a across the board flat tax. It is based upon the amount of usage that each individual uses. Now, the challenges to this from an audit point of view are quite numerous. I've been reading through some legal briefs on cities that are trying to audit the telecommunications industry, and where provisions that protect citizens from disclosure are the key ingredient that keeps telecommunications, that helps telecommunications companies from disclosing the real numbers. And so it is very possible that some telecommunications companies are not disclosing and are not. Let me put it this way: they're charging a tax, but the municipality is not receiving the benefit from that. So that's an issue, and obviously the city council voted to approve the removal of the exemption. And so now the city of McLennan Chisholm has a new revenue source, which is important, especially since we're trying to keep the property tax rate low. That's a key point in this whole thing. And again, citizens had the right. Citizens made a decision by voting to approve the sales tax, to increase the sales tax. That was a decision that citizens of McLennan Chisholm made at the ballot box by a vote, and overwhelmingly approved that. And so this is nothing out of the ordinary, in especially when conservatives like myself, I don't have problem with necessarily consumption taxes. The problem that I have is how often consumption taxes and things like that are levied. New consumption taxes, those types of things, we need to make sure that we're not kind of going overboard. But in this case, this has been in effect for, goodness, I think since 2006 is when I read this came into effect. So it's been quite a while, and the city has missed out on that. And it's just because most cities are not aware of what's going on. Finally, the last thing during the meeting that I wanted to highlight was that housing starts have kind of been reduced. And it was interesting because Mr. Councilmember Larkin said that he's concerned about the fact that the city is budgeting based upon the amount of income the city is receiving on housing starts and the fees and things like that. The problem with that is, for a large part, the city, as we budgeted, all these housing starts and all of that money, there's a reason why every year our city had a significant surplus, and what did we do with that surplus? We put it toward the debt that was placed upon us by building a city hall that the citizens didn't know about, didn't approve. And so that's where we put most of that money. So while Mr. Larkin is trying to create the illusion that our budget was based upon pie in the sky numbers about projections of growth within the city, the reality is most of our budget was not necessarily based upon those starts. It was based upon what the tax revenue was, and we lived within the confines of that. We knew that there would be some growth. We just didn't know how much, and so we were very conservative in our estimates on that. And when I was mayor, when I was on city council, our estimates were very short of what the actual numbers ended up being. It's important to also understand that Sonoma Verde Phase 1 is almost out of lots, and also with the weather, there's not a lot of construction going on during the monsoon season of Texas that we've had. But for the most part, Phase 2 obviously is going to be a new project for a new opportunity for the city to receive revenue. But I do think it's going to be interesting to see their little retreat and what they come out of that retreat with. What kind of cuts are they going to make? Because how are they going to plan to start investing in the fire department and prepare for, as the federal grant starts shrinking back, which we've got one more year of full funding from the federal government. How are they preparing to pay for the rest of that? I found it interesting that I think it was the Mayor Pro Tem Bloom highlighted when reports were going around, and the fire chief, he said, I noticed that most of the calls, a majority of the calls, were inside the city rather than outside the city. And obviously that's because I've been making such a case about the fact that most calls for the fire department are outside the city, not inside the city. Well, I do plan to do an open records request and look at the actual call volume. I'm also going to investigate and audit to make sure that the fire department is actually including the correct houses inside the city. Because when I went and did an investigation, there is at the time that I was mayor, there was nothing in place that where the county where the dispatch could differentiate between inside and outside the city. It was one fire district. So I'm very interested to see how accurate the fire chief's numbers really are. And I'm not saying that he's lying at all. It could very well be that everything he's saying is absolutely true. So I'm just, as Reagan would say, trust but verify. That's really basically all I'm trying to do in saying that. So obviously the numbers will bear themselves out, but it is critically important that this city council take very seriously how much of our citizens are paying for fire department services, and those who are on the outside, the unincorporated area, they contribute nothing. Where most of the fire calls, in my argument, I still assess, I would still argue on an annual basis, most fire calls go outside of the city. So, yeah, I'd like to know what their plan is, and I'm sure you would too. So we'll be holding them accountable on that, and I think that will certainly it'll be entertaining at the very least to see how they kind of massage the numbers, and more importantly, how are they going to accommodate for the change or the change in the income from the federal grant that's coming in, because that's going to have a pretty substantial impact on the budget. So they want to have full-time firefighters that where we have one house fire every, I think the average is actually more like every year and a half, and where most of the calls go outside of the city, or have at least historically gone outside of the city. So I guess we'll have to see what transpires. Well, I appreciate you being with me today, and obviously I'll be back next Tuesday and for another show to highlight. It's my understanding that our council member Dahl, the one who is completely unprepared and doesn't read and prepare for city council meetings, because he didn't know that the city administrator had placed a list of all the cities that had pulled away from the exemption. That very fact concerns me greatly. So I'll be interested to see how Mr. Dahl spins that, and what his take on the city council meeting is. So until next time, I appreciate you being with me. I am Bunker Bob Steinhagen. I look forward to being with you. And until then, we will see you next time. Have a great day.